think it's actually coming.
Am I good to go?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's start off with, and I don't know if there were some council and some RDC folks during the workshop series. So just a few of these slides may be repetition, but we thought we'd just kind of give you the whole presentation of economic development, specifically around lead generation and what site selection, what that process looks like. So we're going to actually go through, I've done some exercises on here, and we'll go through that as well. Is everybody hearing me okay?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay. So on economic development, I think the key thing here is that there is no one size fits all. Every community is different, and every community has their own view or perception of what they think they want to do to grow their community. I think the key that I like about the definition here is the last paragraph, that for you as elected leaders, it's really looking at sustainable solutions and strategies and a vision that creates that environment that's conducive to job creation and increasing your tax base, and then enhancing your quality of life. The one thing I want to say is if anybody has questions as we go along, let's just address them. So I don't know, just shout out. How's that?
We will.
Okay. One of the other foundational principles I wanted to make sure you all walked away with is understanding the difference between base industries and your non-base or service industries, and that a healthy community has both of these. The blend is going to be different based on each community's dynamics and characteristics, but it's critically important to make sure that you do have a blend in your business basket, so to speak. So base industries are really those companies that are going to make something and they're going to sell it outside of your community, or export it, as they say, outside of your community, so that those are new dollars coming back into the town of Culver. So an example here is your ACPI wood products. You know, what they're doing over there, what they're manufacturing, that pretty much all leaves your community. And so those new dollars are coming back to you. On the reverse side is the non-base industries that, as you can see the examples, pretty much all of your retail and your dining, your banks, any kind of retail, and any kind of local restaurants, even if it's a chain, those are generally just circulating dollars around in the community. So again, you know, you've got a pretty vibrant downtown, a lot of retail. You also have tourism, which came up in the workshop, and that's kind of a unique animal in that it fits both of these, which is really, as I said, unique, because there are people coming into your community, leaving cash, and then going back out. There are people coming in, buying things, and leaving with those products. So with regards to tourism, it kind of is a blend of these two, depending on what the activity is. The components of a solid economic development program, I like to use the three-legged stool because everybody's familiar with that. It's critical for a community to have strategies around economic development, strategies around community or place development, and then strategies around talent development. And we'll talk a little bit about each of these. And I've got until 6, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Well,
Okay. So on the economic development front, that particular leg of the stool, 2 kinds of economic development with regards to business development. You have the business attraction side of things, where you're creating activities and goals and objectives around bringing in new business investment into your community. And a lot of communities choose to target certain subsectors. We talked about in our sessions with you all about the Internet of Things, which is what IoT stands for. So anything to do with the Internet, whether it's, for instance, Marshall County Economic Development Corporation did the knowledge-based sector, that would fall under the Internet of Things, if you will. Looking at boutique data centers, which are some of these smaller data centers that some of your smaller mid-level box distribution companies, not your Amazons, but maybe a Kohl's, would look at a smaller community for an investment into a data center. What's nice about data centers, and they can fit in pretty much any community if you have the utility infrastructure, is that they create a lot of tax revenue because they're heavy capital investment, but they employ very few people, sometimes as low as 10, 15 people, but they pay extremely well, anywhere from $50,000 on up. So it's a nice type of business sector to have in a community because of the taxes generated by that investment. And a lot of times you don't even know they're there. Again, because you don't have truck traffic, you don't have a lot of employees in and out of the building. Another sector would be research and development. Again, that could take many forms, whether that's for manufacturing or the Internet of Things. I mean, R&D falls into every subsector of the business environment. On the other side is your business retention and expansion. Again, having policies and programs in place so that you're developing and maintaining relationships with your existing business community. And so I learned from Jonathan that you already have somewhat of a business retention and expansion program where you're at least visiting some of your key employers on an annual basis. And that's critically important because you do want to get in front of any challenges or any growth opportunities that they may be experiencing. And if you have those built-in relationships, they're more apt to come to you before they pull the trigger on an expansion or before some challenges really start impacting their business structure. Questions about business attraction or BR&E?
No.
Okay. I thought you'd find it interesting since all your leads for Marshall County go to your LEDO organization. We did set up Jonathan. So Jonathan, are you seeing those emails from the state?
No, I didn't start getting those yet. Sure, I'll have to talk with you about that.
Okay, all right. Okay, we can do that. So last year, the IEDC, which is the state's economic development office, so the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, they are, as I said, the state's lead on economic development. And with business attraction, generally that will start at the state level because they're trying to do the path of least resistance. And maybe it's an international company and they're not familiar with the state of Indiana, with particular communities. So it's easier to start at the state level and then work their way through the geography of the communities. And we'll talk about that process here in the presentation. But last year in 2020, the types of properties that were requested that included Marshall County. So not all leads does Marshall County see. And not all leads is Marshall County in the geography of the criteria the company is searching for. So for those leads that came in last year that did include Marshall County, you can see there were a total of 38. And the majority of the requests were for existing buildings. So actually 63% of those 38 requests that included Marshall County last year, those companies were searching for an existing facility that they could go in, retrofit, and get going. 28% was for land where they could do a ground up construction. And then the final 9% of those 38 the company was looking for either land or a building. At that point, they just didn't care. But 38 is a pretty good number for a rural community like Marshall County. Trouble is, if you don't have existing buildings, those are missed opportunities. So ideally, Marshall County then would be looking at each of the communities in Marshall County to determine who's got the kind of product that this search is looking for.
Hey, Cheryl, could I ask a quick question? It's Lee Marshall.
Yes, of course.
Is there any way that once those leads come in, that they're being tracked until there's not a lead anymore? So, if it came into MCEDC, for example, they're referred there, lead number 1 comes in and they're looking for a building. Would we all, anybody in Marshall County be able to track what happened to that lead? Did they go to Bourbon? Did they go to Argus? Did they go to Bremen? Did they come to Culver? Where did they go with the lead? And what was the result of the lead? Could we look at those 38 leads and they said, we didn't like any of your buildings, or the land wasn't right, or the land wasn't prepared, for us to build on? Will we be able to track any of that?
Lee, that is the $1 million question. And I've been doing this for almost 30 years. And my biggest frustration is when a lead comes in, it is strictly that. I cringe when leados say, oh, we got a project, it came in, and no, it's not a project until they start working with you and they've chosen your community. At this point, it is strictly a lead looking for a product that is either a building of such and such square footage or land. The frustration is the state tracks that to the extent that they can. Some projects that maybe are some leads that come in that did turn into projects, maybe they died away, or they got put on the back burner, or we had COVID, or we had an economic crisis. There's a lot of reasons why a lead that may have turned into a project falls away. The other side of it is when that lead does finally land in a community, we rarely ever know it. I try to track, as you all know, I'm the contracted Lido for Crawfordsville in Montgomery County. And I try to track my leads, and I reach out to IEDC occasionally because I'll see a news line that it sounds a lot like lead X. And I'll ask, hey, was that project such and such? Because they'll give it a project name. And so the short answer is no, there's no way to track because we're one of, in this case, Marshall County was one of many other counties in those 38 requests that came through. In the system, in the database that I get this information from, not one time in that 38 quantity of leads was Marshall County the only county under consideration.
I was just gonna say, my question was kind of more, once it comes to Marshall County, is it tracked? I get the IEDC would be more difficult because it's so dispersed, but I'm just looking like what I used to do for a living. Like almost any sales software would track leads. Say once it came into Marshall County and you had a contact with somebody, you had a conversation and you create a profile for them. Now they're your contact and you follow up with them and you create that every time you engage, you're uploading that information. I just don't find it a hugely difficult thing to like address. I get it from the IEDC level, and that wouldn't be something you necessarily would be doing, but you know what I'm saying, at each tiny stop where that lead goes, that they would track it. That's kind of what I was asking.
No, okay, yeah.
Hey,
I
Cheryl.
can't tell you what Marshall County EDC does. Not every Lido can afford that kind of tracking software, but everybody can afford Excel spreadsheet, right?
Right.
And so I can't answer that. I don't know. I would hope that they tracked all the leads that they responded to every year. And if one happened to land in Marshall County, I would hope you would all know that and that, they would be celebrating that in the news and so on and so forth. But that's a question for Marshall County.
Hey, Cheryl, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Hi, this is Laura Walls
Hey,
with
Laura.
Marshall County Economic Development. Hey, Cheryl, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Well, I was I'm enjoying your presentation. I'm very sorry to chime in, but I can tell you, Lee, that the Marshall County EDC does track all our leads. We report it to the board of directors on a monthly basis, how many leads we had from the state, how many leads were generated outside from other sources, either the regional partnership or um, self-generated leads. And it's my expectation. I haven't I haven't had a chance to come to Culver Town Board meeting yet, but those kinds of figures will be reported to the individual communities on a regular basis. I don't know if they always have been, but when I was in Carroll County, that's how I did it, and I'm bringing that to here.
Yay. Good. Thank you.
No
I'll
problem.
say yay too, because when I was the Ledo in Johnson County for 11 years, I did the same thing, Laura. You know, you got to go out and talk to your communities. Good for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the 2020 leads from IEDC last year, the industry type. Again, these are the 38 that hit or included Marshall County. And you can see the majority of those were for food manufacturing or some sort of food processing, which in my opinion is a great subsector to have in your community. Then I would say there's probably a trio then of your general manufacturing, auto parts, tier one suppliers, that kind of thing, and plastics manufacturing. But again, I just throw these in here to give you guys an idea of what the leads were looking like for 2020, because Laura, I'm glad you're on. They never saw this kind of information. So it's just nice for communities to know who, not necessarily who, but what kinds of companies are looking. Here is a sample lead that came from IEDC. And I apologize for the small writing, but I'm hoping Jonathan can make copies for you all. This was a lead that came in 2020. And as you can see, they give it a name, Project Husky. Sometimes the state gives it a name, sometimes the site consultant or the company. It tells you a little bit about what the product is. As you can see, this was food. It's extended shelf life and non-allergenic dairy products. So who knows what that is. They're going to create 20 jobs, they hope, with wages at the county's average wage, which your county's average wage right now is $21.36, according to Stats Indiana. The capital investment is $110 million, and you can see they've broken that down between real property, so the facility, and then the equipment side is $90 million. I will tell you this particular lead provided a lot of information. Sometimes you don't get that. You get, hey, we're a manufacturer and we're looking for 200,000 square feet, and that's about it. You can see the timeline. They've actually provided a timeline, which is really nice for Laura when she gets a lead like this, to kind of give an idea of what we're looking at and how quickly this project lead may move. And the search parameters. So you can see here, I've made Marshall County bold. So you guys were in this mix. So this was a lead that came to the EDC there in Marshall County. They're looking for greenfield sites of 20 to 30 acres to accommodate a 200,000 square foot building. And then they're looking for, the reason they're looking for 20 to 30 acres is because they want to have future land for an addition of 200,000 square feet more for in the future. Client prefers that the site be located proximate to an interstate highway or a road with similar service level. So technically we could look at Highway 31 up to the interstate. Sites should have utility service readily available and so on. You can see the utility information that they've provided. So I wanted you all as elected and appointed leaders to see what an actual lead that comes into your Lido office looks like. And this is a real life example. So one of the things that a Lido like Laura would do is she's going to be looking throughout her inventory for Marshall County for a 20 to 30 acre site that could accommodate this building, but she's also going to be looking at its proximity to either an interstate or, as it says here, a road with similar service levels. So 31, you see a lot of truck traffic on 31. And then she's also going to be looking at utility requirements. Do our sites have the necessary utilities in place, or can we get the necessary service capacity in place by the time this project comes to fruition if they choose Marshall County? So that's just some of the information at this stage in the game that your Lido would be considering. And Laura, feel free to hop in at any time since you're on the call. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the site selection process, and what I really want everyone to understand, it's really site elimination. And we'll talk about why that is. Here's a sample diagram of what the site selection process looks like. So as you can see, it's this upside down pyramid, this upside down funnel, whatever you want to call this illustration. But what happens is a company is looking to either site a new location or expand into a new market. And many times they'll hire a site selection firm to do the groundwork and the data collection for them, so that key leadership is not trying to run the company and do this at the same time. So one of the things that happens is at the first stage where it says define the search region, is that the company will talk about a geography of interest that they want for this new facility. And it could be.
I really listen to the town meeting, see who they appoint and stuff, but this,
You're not muted. Go ahead, Sharon.
Am I okay to go on?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. And so what happens is, let's say there's a company that says, I want to be in the Midwest. Okay, so now we're looking at Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, could be Kentucky, could be Wisconsin, you name it, Illinois. And they say, I need to be, just like this lead that we saw previously said, I need to be a proximate location to an interstate. So that site selection firm is going to be looking at those states in the Midwest, and then they're going to talk with that company about other search criteria that's going to be important to them. Maybe they need rail. So that's going to further define the geography. But you can put that in perspective. If some company says, I want to be in the Midwest with rail near an interstate. Well, good Lord, look how many states that is here in the Midwest and how many communities that is within those states. And so it's very possible that a site selection firm could have hundreds of communities and sites to look at. And so we talk about the request for information process where that site selection firm may send a data collection sheet to that community. And that's step number 3. So what's happened here that we've talked about is the company has defined their search region. The site selection firm has gone through all kinds of publicly accessible data to try to screen through rail and you name it, whatever that search criteria looks like. They're also looking at, population numbers and probably looking at median income. I mean, the list just goes on, and the priority of each of those criteria is different for every company. But let's say on this Project Husky, that Marshall County had a 20 to 30 acre site. And so let's say that then what happens is Laura would have submitted 1 or 2 sites. Generally, we only get the opportunities to send your best site, put your best foot forward. Because again, that site selection firm could be looking at hundreds of submissions. And so if we were to submit 4 sites out of Marshall County, and you saw all those other counties that were in the mix just in Indiana, you can do the math. And that's just one state in the Midwest. Remember that the search criteria example that we're talking about for this process was the Midwest. So you can see it quickly adds up. So once Laura sends that site, let's say the site selection firm looks through all the information she sends and they really like the site. So now they're going to send a request for information, or sometimes it's called a request for proposal. And those can be anywhere from 1 page of additional data that maybe they couldn't find publicly to 40 pages. I mean, they range in size. It's absolutely ridiculous. The largest one I ever worked on, by the time I included all of the attachments, was 97 pages long. And they wanted it in hard copy and they wanted it electronically. And so, again, it could be a simple Excel spreadsheet that says, hey, you know, tell me about the ownership of the 20 to 30 acres and so on and so forth. But again, the work really begins for Laura and her team, or any Lido, when they get that RFI, because again, you've got a deadline to submit all of the information. You have a responsibility as the Lido to answer every single question. And if you can't, you need to notify the IEDC, or if you happen to know who the site selection firm is, you need to notify them and explain why you can't answer it, or if you have a question. I always tell every community, do not give the consultant a reason to scratch you off the list. And as simple as not answering some questions, if I'm looking at 420 submissions or 420 RFIs, I'm going to start the easy way. And if you didn't answer the questions, you're out. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So hopefully then when you get down to number 4, you hope that the name of the game for the community is to stay in the game, right? So you hope they liked what they saw in your RFI and the presentation of the information and materials, so much so that they said, okay, we've eliminated, 300 sites and we're going to go visit 10 sites in each state. And Marshall County happens to be one. So again, the work really kicks up now for Laura and her team if they get a site visit, because that's when that site search firm, and it could have representatives of the company. Again, keep in mind, you have no idea who this company is at this point. And they want to come out, they may want to meet with elected officials, they may want to meet with chamber folks or school or college folks. They may want to meet with HR members of your manufacturers or other similar industries. And they definitely want to come and see the site for themselves. But what they're doing is evaluating you as a community. Did the team that Laura pulled together, did they all look like they got along? Was there tension in the room? When we drove around, how did the community present itself from the windshield? Did it look nice? I mean, I always joke with the communities and say, look, if we get a site visit, we need to see where the crappy parts of town are from the office of the Lido to the site we're going to look at, and all points in between, because we really want this community to show well. We want to have our best foot forward, because it is first impressions. And as all of you know, you don't get to change that, hardly ever. So then you hope that after they leave, they really liked what they saw, and then they start negotiating with regards to the land or the building, and now they're interested in incentives. And so that's going to be a conversation that Laura and her team and whoever the elected officials are, whichever community it's happens to be in. We'll start that work to identify what practical incentive package makes sense for this particular project. And then from there, it's about, and I'm really at the 30,000 foot level here. I mean, we could talk in greater detail, but in essence of time, we won't. But hopefully they accept the letter of incentives from the elected official, and they say, okay, it's Marshall County and it's Culver, Indiana in Marshall County, and we've picked it. You want to be that dot at the bottom of or the end of the process. So that's kind of a high level of what the site elimination process looks like. But as I said, the goal is through every level of this evaluation is that you hope to stay in the game. Now, there are many factors and criteria that can knock a community out that you have absolutely no control over. But for those things that you do have control over, like did they all work well together? Did you bring the whole team together? Were the utilities at the table? And did I get my questions answered? And so on and so forth. Is the site really under control? Is there an asking price for the site, and so on and so forth? Things like utility capacity, it's either there or it's not. And sometimes, as I said, there are just things that you can't control in the selection process. But this at least give you a basic understanding of what that process looks like. Questions?
Hey, Cheryl, could I just ask real quickly in terms of the RFPs, do you and Laura feel there's anything related to speed in terms of response time that sets you apart in terms of trying to differentiate yourself? I'm not saying speed without accuracy, but does that ever, have you guys seen that that's meaningful at all?
Oh yeah, it's meaningful because every time you get an RFI, there's a deadline.
Okay.
You may get a day, you may get a week, or anything in between. And so that's why I always say it's all hands on deck, because they're asking a lot of information that you may have to go and get the answers to. And so I can't speak for Laura and how she operates, but yes, there is always a deadline. And if for some reason you cannot, I cannot meet this deadline, you have got to let the state know, whoever your point person is. If you're lucky enough to be working directly with the site search firm, or if you're working through IEDC, you have got to let them know, because yes, I mean, they've given you a deadline for a reason. And a lot of times the state will assign a deadline based on the deadline that the company is given, so that the state has time to compile all of the responses from the communities that are going to submit.
It's been my experience that companies, as long as you meet the deadline, you're fine. It's not always quicker is better, but more complete, well-organized, professional proposals are key. And our statewide organization for economic developers has spent a lot of time in the last several years trying to help local economic developers put forth the best possible RFI.
Mm-hmm.
And just personally, that's my favorite part of the stage, because I like to take that liberal arts education and the critical thinking and the problem solving and make sure my RFIs are better than everyone else's. That's just a personal thing. And then in the site selection process, when we get down to the site visit, that's usually the point where elected officials are engaged and really detailed, brought up to speed. If I reached out to elected officials every time I submitted a lead, I mean, if that's what they request, I'm happy to do it. But I got a lead today for an 80,000 square foot building and 100 acres to go with it. I got it at the end of the day. I have several days to find properties, but we get leads pretty regularly, and so I just need to work out with you guys what stage you want to be brought in and how much detail you want along the way, and I'm happy to accommodate that.
Yeah, and Laura's right. I mean, accuracy, it goes without saying. I mean, you want to submit the most perfect package of information that you possibly can, because you do want to differentiate yourself. Good question. Okay, we talked a little bit about the local incentives during our workshops. So you here in Culver, you have the 3 primary tools. We've talked about real property abatement. You're very familiar with that, and personal property tax abatement, and the use of TIF. So I'm just going to go quickly through these. If you have specific questions, just shout out. But I think you all know how property tax works because you have provided that in the past. I think the biggest benefit that I always like to talk about is that it really does help the company reduce their operating expenses, but you're still getting revenue into the community from those taxes even after an abatement. So for those in the community that just don't understand how it works, sometimes they think, oh, you know, the council's giving everything away and that company's never going to pay taxes. And you all know that's just not the case. So for many times, it's really about educating your constituents about how these statutory programs really do work. Personal property and real property, sometimes, even though it's a statutory program, every community has the flexibility to look at certain criteria. And so here's just a sampling of some of the criteria that companies use when determining the length of an abatement, or what percentage of an abatement if you're not using the state standard schedule. Eligible property types, so of course new buildings, improvement to existing buildings like expansions, as long as it's new to Indiana. So that means it could be used equipment that the company is buying. As long as it's new to Indiana, it's eligible. And then vacant buildings can be eligible for real property tax abatement as well.
Hey, Cheryl, about,
Yeah.
do you, in your experience, because we've talked about this locally when we did an abatement for LK Manufacturing, the policy at the time with MCEDC was to do 100% for the full 10 years, whereas, you know, sometimes it goes down, it's incremented, 100, 90, 80%. Each year it goes down. What's common, or what do you see more of? I'm just curious, comparing apples to apples.
I'm sorry, Jenny, you were cutting out. So you said the policy was what now?
To do the abatement at 100% for 10 years versus
Yeah, okay, yeah.
implementing it. Is that common or is that unusual?
I wouldn't say it's common practice. It does get used on a fairly regular basis, but generally it's for pretty competitive projects. I mean, if you're abating 100% for all 10 years, you know, you're getting no tax revenue as a result. Was that both real and personal, or were they just looking at ACPI as on the real side, or was that also equipment?
Yeah.
It was both.
Both types.
Well, hopefully you've got a return on investment calculation that you as elected leaders and appointed leaders are looking at to evaluate those projects when they come before you. You know, property tax is your paycheck. So, you know, if you're abating something for 100% for the full 10 years on both real property and equipment, you're not getting anything basically in tax revenue for 10 years. So again, I think it comes back to how competitive the project is, how important it is to your community. I mean, obviously that's an existing company. So I don't know the specifics of the project that they were seeking abatement for, but I would say most rural communities will use the standard deduction table, which I've got here in the presentation. and save the really aggressive form of tax abatement, as you just described, for those projects that you really want badly and that are highly competitive. And if they didn't come to your community, it would be detrimental. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Jenny, I have a very difficult time imagining a project that I would ask for 10 years, 100%. But we work with Baker Tilly, and we would work with the community's financial planner to look at the financial impact of a couple of different schedules, so we can find the balance between the competitive schedule for the company, but one that makes the most sense for the community as well.
Yeah.
Thanks,
And I
Laura.
think that's what most communities do now is, they look at a blend, maybe, and there's a lot of formulas out there. And if you guys are using Baker Tilly, I mean, they're going to run that, but that's what I was talking about, having some kind of return on investment evaluation tool to find out what the benefit is to your community. I do know there have been communities that used that 100% for 10 years. Personally, I'm not a fan. I don't think there's anything wrong with being aggressive where you maybe abate for 3 years at 100%. Again, if it's a project you really want and you really are in a competitive situation, but a full 10 years, yeah, I just kind of shake my head when I've heard of a few communities that have done that. Because again, it's also about paycheck back to your community, right? As elected leaders. Yeah. Okay, I won't spend a lot of time on TIF. I know you've got redevelopment commission members there, so you are very aware of how that works. Again, some of the samples of or examples of eligible uses for TIF that maybe you have not thought about or considered in the past. I do know from Jonathan that, on the residential single family dwellings, you're not eligible. So that's the latest change to TIF. But we are in a new legislative session, and the legislators love to mess with the TIF statute. So we'll see what happens for 2021. Again, I told you earlier, we're going to kind of walk through an example so you can see. And this is the standard deduction schedule, Jenny, that you were talking about, set by the state through the DLGF. So it's 195. You can see how that phases in over that 10-year period. Yeah. So I'm going to preface the rest of this by saying I took some liberties. I showed you the lead. Oops. Remember the lead? It was Project Husky for food processing, wanting 20 to 30 acres, 200 jobs, and $110 million, right? And I know we've had some discussions in the workshops about what kinds of subsectors might make sense for us. And again, you have your own utility. I think there's a lot of advantages that you have as the town of Culver for certain kinds of food processing, in addition to maybe the Internet of Things and some of the other ideas that you all have been knocking around. But as I was looking through your inventory through the GIS system, I noticed the APCI site, they have, give or take, 62 acres, and you can see they're using about a third of it. You've got about another third that looks like it's woods and maybe some wetland, who knows what's in there. But the southern part of their property is not being used. And so when you're looking at a lead like this, it's important to engage Laura and her team. And I know she really hasn't had a chance to get out to all of her communities yet, but would APCI consider selling off some of their land so that you could have an opportunity to get in the game and have a site that Laura may be able to put in her inventory for the Marshall County Sites and Buildings database. So the area in blue that I've marked off is approximately 20 acres using the measuring tool on the GIS site. And so let's say APCI said, sure, we're not going to use it. We don't see us using it in the foreseeable future. When we came here as LK, they wanted more land, which is common sometimes for future expansion. But in this case, APCI says, sure, I think we will work with the town and the redevelopment commission, because this is also in a TIF, to sell off a 20-acre parcel just so you have some inventory for potential manufacturing. So we go back to the original lead of Project Husky. Remember the extended shelf life, dairy product, 200,000 square foot facility, wanting 20 to 30 acres. Cost of the building was $20 million. Your equipment was the $90 million for a total of $110 million. So right now, that site, it's zoned industrial. It's I-2 and I-1. Tax district, you know what your tax district is, you know what your 2020 tax rate is. And I'm using 2020 because the formula that I use to calculate an abatement, they've not updated it to the 2021 certified rates yet. So I wanted to keep apples to apples. Your 2019 paid 2020 taxes for that 62-acre site was $79,977. But I want you to make sure you understand that that includes that entire 62-acre parcel. So it also includes the facility for ACPI. So if we were going to say all things being equal, and we were going to look at the estimated tax revenue on that 62-acre site over the next 10 years, and no increase in assessed value, which we know is not going to be the case, and no additional growth, no future abatements, so on and so forth, we could say very conservatively that the 10-year taxes on that property, if nothing changes, is just under $800,000. Versus if the company were willing to sell off 20 acres. And of course, this is all about future planning, right? And figuring out, since we already got in manufacturing there, does it make sense to maybe look at that as a very small industrial park? Who knows? And that's a discussion for a future meeting. But if you were to take this and run the abatement calculation for a 10-year real property tax abatement using the standard schedule, and a 10-year personal property abatement, again, using the standard schedule, you can see what kind of tax revenue would be generated. And again, these are very conservative numbers because the formula, the system that I use, it does not account for any increase in assessed value, no change in tax rates. So you're really kind of trying to look at the, the present value of money. So you can see that if you add those together, 10 years, that tax revenue with an abatement for a 20-acre site to go after Project Husky could conservatively generate $4.1 million in taxes for that TIF district. So I'm going to stop here and ask if there are any questions, if this makes sense. Again, I know you guys are very familiar with abatement, but just based on our conversations that we've had previously about, do we look at some manufacturing? If so, what kind? What about land development? And again, I took liberties here with ACPI because I was looking at an example to show you. We have no idea if they're willing to sell off part of their land, and I don't want it getting out there that we're talking about them selling their land either. But it's something for you to think about as you're looking at a longer term vision for economic development for your community. And where do you lay these areas out? So again, I took liberties with that site because I found it And I wanted to create an example for you. But again, we don't want it getting out that, yay, we're going to have them sell off their land.
Sure.
Yes.
I've never heard in a economic development presentation about the term or the theory of using toll manufacturing. And it seems to me with ACPI being totally vertically integrated, there might be an opportunity for somewhere along in their process for someone to do a portion or a fraction of that process cheaper than they can do it. And you talk about an adjacent piece of property, that would be, golden to somebody that, may want to approach them on something.
No, you're exactly right. And I think now that you got Laura on board, and I would say this, whether she's on the call or not, I've already encouraged Jenny to start building that relationship. I think it's really important to have her understand what kinds of sectors appeal to you all and what conversations you may have already had with your existing companies. Yes, is there part of a supply chain to help ACPI that you and Laura may be able to explore and do some further research on? Those are questions for you all to talk to her about. But, I do see an advantage, the fact that they have 62 acres and the way it's laid out, they're going to have to clear those trees and whatever else is in there just immediately south of their site if they were going to expand. So, there's a couple of options. And this is just my experience. Laura may have a different opinion, but not only could it be some kind of supply chain for that company, but is there something else that makes sense for that location in addition to wood?
One of the prime examples, premier examples of toll manufacturing has been in the orthopedic industry.
Mm-hmm.
And when in Kay County and Elkhart County, somewhat here in Marshall County, look at the numerous tool and die companies that basically, have been established because they're doing toll manufacturing for Zimmer, Biomet, and others.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we call it supply chain. We're looking at those like-minded suppliers, whether it's machining or what have you, that could help support that base industry that you have there. But that all takes work and understanding what you all are interested in. What's it going to take to continue to nurture and grow the companies that you already have there? Do you have the utility capacity? Do you have the land? There's a lot that goes into that whole supply chain discussion about supporting your existing. Or is there some kind of supply chain that you could support your neighboring communities or your neighboring county? I'll give you a perfect example. The Honda plant that's in Decatur County in just outside of Greensburg, they have a defined radius for talent recruitment and for supply chain recruitment. They want it to be 45 to 50 minutes, which in Indiana is miles, basically, outside, away from the Greensburg area, because they don't want to cannibalize their existing plant. And so, when I was in Johnson County, that we fell into that parameter. we fell outside of that parameter, excuse me. So we were able to look at a lot of these tier one suppliers because we were outside that boundary. And so, I mean, those are things that now that you have Laura, maybe it's worth having those kinds of discussions as a whole county to help understand what each community can bring to the table.
And Cheryl, the supply chain is a really good point. Also, the region, Marshall County is very fortunate to be part of a very strong regional economic development organization. And they've done a lot of research on clusters. And so they've done a cluster analysis for our region, and we can use that data to help recruit companies that fit in using their data. So some of this isn't necessarily reinventing the wheel, but taking the data that we already have and putting it into action plans.
No, I completely agree. You're right. And I think one of the things that's been missing, as I understand it, is that outreach from the Lido back into the communities to support that regional effort in the clusters. And that's why, I'm encouraging them to, start building that relationship with you so that you understand where Culver is and where they're coming from and how they can complement the goals of the county and the region. Because I think there's been, in just the conversations I've had, there's been this disconnect with all the great work that the region is doing, not only with clusters, but also with talent development, and, Jenny's effort trying to get at the table. So there's a lot of good work that the region has done, but I don't think it has trickled down into the communities within Marshall County. And that hopefully will change with you now at the helm.
I would add that Laura said something that I thought was really important. She used the word plan, and we really haven't had a plan of who we want to be and what we want to do and what we want to recruit. And I think that makes it clearer to someone like Laura as well in terms of, what she would do and how she would help.
Exactly, Lee. Good point.
And I'm sorry, I did not mean to hijack your awesome presentation, Cheryl. And I will apologize to you again one-on-one. But I am planning to come to a town council meeting tonight. I'm going to Bourbon, and I couldn't do. And now you guys are meeting virtually, so I was able to jump into this meeting that I found out about at the last minute. But I do plan to come to your meeting later this month and formally introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my approach and my experiences and how much I prioritize smaller communities. And I think Culver is a fantastic community. And I think it's great that you've reached out to Cheryl and that she's been able to help you guys out. And I'm happy to partner and work with Cheryl however you guys want me to. And Ginny's not going to have to fight to get at the table. Ginny's going to fight to get to want to leave the table. I'm going to chain her to it. Don't worry.
Yeah, I might add that Laura and I have our first meeting tomorrow. So
Oh, good.
I will be seeing her at 10 a.m.
Yes.
Well, Laura,
I'm very looking forward.
You did not hijack. I'm glad you were actually on the call. So I think it's important that you're engaging early on. So this is fantastic.
Could I ask Laura a question that has nothing to do with, it's kind of personal in a way? I just want to see if she knows somebody. Did you work with Shan Sheridan?
I did. Well, Shan is a part of our the regional economic development organization in that Carroll County and Montgomery County are also members of. So I've known Shan for probably 15 years now.
Okay. I just met a bunch of people from Delphi right after you guys had won Stellar. And I was so interested in it. And they invited me to their meetings and had me for dinner. It was the nicest group of people. I don't know if you were part of it back then, but I just remember Shan Sheridan was the head of economic development, I think for whatever, is that Clinton County?
Yes, Clinton County.
That was the job he had back then. Sorry. Okay.
Yes. So when I was in Carroll County, we were awarded Stellar in 2012, and we were the third community in the state. And I was the point person on our application with the Mayor Strasser, and we had a very, very small committee. Really, we did it with about 5 people total, and I would never do that again. Definitely needed more people, but we had a really strong group of mixture of professional staff and professional volunteers. And yeah, it was a very special time to be a part of that.
Yeah, it was, I was just so impressed. I remember when you guys won, I was like, Delphi, but yeah, I did meet some of the people involved in it, and they were very, very nice. So anyway, just wanted to ask.
Good, good. I'm glad they were nice.
Mhm.
Well, we are at 6:12, and I know you have a council meeting. So just to try to wrap up, does anybody have any final questions? Is there anything that I didn't address that you hoped I would?
No, I think that's really educational. Even compared to the last sessions, it was nice to get more a deep dive on lead generation and what occurs there. And I feel like I learned a lot in an hour.
Okay. Well, guys, thanks again. If there are any questions you have afterwards, please, you've got my contact information. Shoot it to Jonathan or Jenny, or reach out to me direct. I'm more than happy to do any follow-up.
Great. Thank you,
Thank you.
Cheryl.
Thanks, guys. Take care and stay well.
You too.
Thank you.
But
Are we on a different link for the regular
we got a
meeting?
different link, so
Okay.
we'll close this one out and meeting anyone over there at 6:30.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to close out this meeting. If you're coming to the regular one, we'll log in later.